Have you ever just stopped and stared at one of those ancient wonders? A pyramid, a massive stone temple, and thought to yourself, how did they build that? It's a question that's been around forever. So let's get into it, because the answers people have come up with are just as wild as the buildings themselves.
So that's really the big question, isn't it? We see these incredible feats of engineering, and they just don't seem to line up with what we're told about the past. I mean, how did people with what we assume were simple tools manage to build things that would be a serious challenge for us, even with all our modern machinery?
Okay, so check this out. This is Trajan's Markets in Rome. It's basically an ancient shopping mall, built almost 2,000 years ago. Now, think about this. It's in an earthquake zone, it's been pounded by rain and wind for centuries, and it's still standing. That kind of impossible durability is what forces us to ask the big questions, and that's where things get really interesting.
All right, so let's start with the explanation that everybody loves to talk about, the one you see in documentaries and on late-night TV. What if the answer to how they built these things isn't actually human at all? You've probably heard of it, the ancient astronaut hypothesis. The idea is pretty simple, really. Aliens came to Earth a long time ago. And, to ancient people, these beings with their crazy high-tech gadgets, well, they would have looked like gods, right? Their technology would have seemed like pure magic. So what's their proof? Where are they getting this from? Well, they look at ancient texts like the Hindu Ramayana, which talks about these flying machines called vimanas. They point to ancient art like rock carvings that, if you squint, kind of look like people in spacesuits. Then, of course, you have the big ones, the pyramids and Stonehenge, which they argue are just too big and too perfect for ancient people. And finally, you get these really bizarre artifacts, like this Mayan sarcophagus lid that looks an awful lot like someone piloting some kind of rocket ship. And this quote right here, it perfectly captures the thinking behind this whole theory. This is from Eric von Daniken, maybe the most famous proponent of all this. He's looking at these giant mysterious lines in the deserts of Peru, and his brain doesn't go to ancient ritual. Nope, it goes straight to airport. It's all about how you choose to see it. So here's the bottom line for this theory. There are no gods, no miracles. It's all just misunderstood technology. What our ancestors called a flying chariot from the heavens was actually a spaceship. A thunderbolt from a god was really just a laser gun. It basically takes all of ancient history and rereads it like a science fiction novel. But, and this is a big but, the scientific community isn't really buying it. The great astronomer Carl Sagan basically said, hold on a second. He argued that for every one of these so-called mysteries, there's a much simpler, perfectly reasonable explanation right here on Earth. And that's what leads us to our second answer, and honestly, this one might be even more mind-blowing than aliens. Okay, so let's completely switch gears. Forget about little green men for a minute. What if the solution isn't out there in the stars, but was right here, hidden in the rocks and minerals of Earth? What if ancient people weren't just brilliant builders, but were also master chemists? Just look at this. This is incredible. On the left, you've got our modern concrete, the stuff we use for everything. It's strong for a while, but it cracks, it crumbles, and in a few decades, it's toast. Then you look at the Roman stuff, 2,000 years later, and it's actually getting stronger. It heals itself. I mean, how is that even possible?
Well, the secret, it turns out, is all in the recipe. This is a sample of Roman concrete, and you can see it's a jumble of stuff. Volcanic rock, pumice, bits of brick, but the big pieces, that's not the secret sauce. The real magic is in the glue, the mortar that's holding it all together.
And here it is. This is the key. They took hydrated lime and mixed it with a very specific kind of volcanic ash. But this wasn't just like mixing up some batter. Oh no. The moment water hit this mixture, a wild chemical reaction kicked off. A reaction so complex, we're still trying to fully understand it today.
So this is how the self-healing works. Get this, a tiny crack appears, water gets inside. Now in our concrete, that's the beginning of the end. But in Roman concrete, that's where the magic starts. The water actually melts tiny bits of volcanic glass still left in the mix, creating this supercharged chemical soup. And then out of that soup, new super strong mineral crystals start growing, like stitches, sealing the crack up tighter and stronger than it was before. The building is literally healing itself.
And here they are, the little guys doing all the heavy lifting. We're looking at microscopic images of those very crystals. Yeah, they've got some fancy names, but you can just think of them as this tiny interlocking armor that grows inside the concrete over time, making it tougher and tougher as the centuries go by.
And the craziest part? The Romans knew. They didn't have microscopes, they didn't know the chemical formulas, but they could see what was happening. This writer, Pliny the Elder, wrote about their concrete structures in the sea almost 2,000 years ago. He said it becomes one single stone, every day stronger. He was watching it happen, even if he couldn't explain exactly why.
Okay, so let's pull back for a second. We've got alien visitors on one side and extraordinary chemistry on the other. What this really shows us are two totally different ways of looking at our own history.
Let's break it down. The alien theory. It starts with a conclusion. Aliens did it, and then reinterprets old stories and art to fit that idea. It's based on speculation. The science approach is the opposite. It starts with the evidence. You look at the material under a microscope. You run chemical tests. You try to break it. You don't have a conclusion yet. And where does that evidence lead? To the sheer, undeniable power of human ingenuity.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? One way of thinking looks at our ancestors and says, no way, they couldn't have been that smart. Aliens must have helped. The other way digs in and asks, okay, how were they that smart? And what you discover is a level of genius that honestly is way more impressive and awe-inspiring than any story about visitors from the stars.
So where does that leave us? Well, today scientists are studying this ancient Roman concrete to try and create better, self-healing materials for our own future. It's amazing. And it just makes you wonder, right? What other brilliant solutions, what other game-changing ideas are just sitting there, waiting for us to rediscover them in the science of our own past?